Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks. On Wednesday, the 24th day of January, year of our Lord 2018, welcome to the John Moore Show. Our prepper tip of the day. You really can find some great bargains if you're careful and know what you're doing, buying government surplus. I'm going to give out 3 websites. One is connected to the federal government. The other 2 are private, but they actually conduct auctions and sales on behalf of the government, the federal government of the United States. And it can be fun, it can be interesting, it can be challenging, and you need to be careful. Do your due diligence, otherwise you may end up with something that you really don't want. Here's the first one. This is a government auction site, gsaauctions.gov. That's Golf Sierra Alpha, gsaauctions.gov. Next one is a private one, Gov, that's Golf Oscar Victor, govliquidation.com. govliquidation.com. And last but not least, govdeals.com. That's G-O-V, Golf Oscar Victor, Delta Echo Alpha Lima Sierra, govdeals.com. In order to place bids, you're going to have to open an account with these entities. I would suggest that unless, depending on your situation, you're not going to want to bid on stuff that's hundreds of miles from your place. You might. It depends on what it is and what your abilities are. It's a big country. And if you're in Florida and you bid on something in Washington State, you're looking at more than 3,000 miles to get there. So be cautious. Check out carefully what you want to bid on. You may want to watch these sites for a while to see what things are going for before you start bidding. If it's something very expensive, I urge you to do your due diligence and actually go in and inspect the item first before you bid on it. That would be wise. It really would. So that's the 3 websites, gsaauctions.com, govliquidation. No, I said gsaauctions.com, gsaauctions.gov. Then we go to govliquidation.com and govdeals.com. Have fun with it and be cautious. We have patient waiting in the green room, my friend Professor James McCanney. Professor McCanney is a credentialed astrophysicist. He's taught astrophysics at the university level. He's taught mathematics at the university level. He's an accomplished amateur archaeologist, shall we say, author of 10 books with more on the way, and weekly radio talk show host. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, John.
Well, you have excellent audio this morning, sir. I want really good. We're back to what's more or less a normal winter for south central Missouri. We had 2 weeks of what for our area would be considered brutal cold. I know you're from Minnesota, so you know what cold is. But for south central Missouri, it was down to 0 and -0 overnight and actual temperature, and running 10-15 degrees daytime highs for about 2 weeks. And you and I had a private conversation confirming what one of my neighbors told me, is that this drought causing the soil to be so dried out, the dry soil conducts the cold much more efficiently than wet soil does. And that makes perfect sense. And we're having pipes freeze underground that have never, ever frozen underground because they were buried deep enough previously. But it's a new world out there, isn't it, sir?
Yeah, exactly. And the tropics are colder, have been for years. It's something I've been watching because that's a bigger indication than anything. The bulk of first world countries' population are in the temperate or climates, like the United States, or in even Arctic climates like Russia. And Europe is actually pretty far north also. So we don't tend to look at tropical climates and things like that, the trends. But it's been very cold in the climates over past years, much colder, and so it's something that people don't track, but that's actually a reality. And I was contacted this past week. I'm in relative constant communication with people in Russia, to people who do TV shows, people who do scientists, let's just put it that way. And nobody in Russia for a long time has ever talked about global warming. It's just not been a topic. Right. Because they do real science there. They're not into the political milieu of the United Nations or Agenda 21 or the Pope or whatever. You know, all of those New World Order, Rothschild minions don't exist in Russia. And so they're talking about global cooling, but not as a result of man-made. Anything man-made is simply the conditions. And the reason the Russians always liked my science from the time they were exposed to it a long time ago is because it corroborates with what they're measuring. They tend to be, you know, atmospheric scientists and do measurements, but also the fact that the sun's energy is at the surface of the sun, not down at the core. If it were down at the core, then the sun would be very constant, and it's not. It's constantly changing, and they knew as early as the mid-90s that the sun was in a cooling trend. And then we had Hale-Bopp, which discharged the solar capacitor all at once, and it left us with a sun that was very depleted in electrical energy, and it's the electrical energy that causes the fusion fire of the surface of the sun. And Dmitriev, it was the guy I was working with over there, said in a paper in 1995 that we were heading into a region of the galaxy with less hydrogen and deuterium. And that was the fuel that the sun needed to burn. So anyway, this is a physical event. It's due to activity in our neighborhood of the galaxy and then the sun itself. So that's what's, we're seeing the result of that.
Well, I'm hearing from some sources, Jim, that we are at the cusp of possibly a mini ice age. Do you have any follow-up on that?
Well, that's what they're worried about also. In fact, I'm working on what I'm doing right now. In fact, I'm just over the top busy with things in the background here. All good. But one of them is a heat source for heating the homes in their actually looking seriously at this in Russia. You know, the United States is, you know, not even thinking about stuff like this. It's not even on the radar.
Right.
And you know, to be quite frank, if we had shortened seasons now last year, I'll tell you for a fact that, say, planting in the mid-states from Ohio over to Nebraska came very late. They were still able to plant on time, but a lot of times in those states they were planting early in May. Now they will not plant until mid-May. That's the corn and the soybean, the major crops there.
Right.
Because they're afraid of cooling weather that's going to stunt the growth. Because corn needs minimum 70 degree day and night to prosper, especially when it's young. So these are reactions, of course, once again, that's not on the radar of the news. They're concentrating on, you know, Russian probe or whatever, but it has nothing to do with any reality at all.
Well, shortening the growing season by 2 weeks is a serious matter, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it's a serious situation. Also, I want to mention that due to chemtrail spraying, the northern woods of the United States are in serious trouble. They are basically dying. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I got to follow up on that, and I've confirmed this with several different sources, and that has to do with flying insects. And if you and I had this conversation, Jim, I don't recall if we have or not. about the flying insects in the United States.
Oh yeah. You were talking about the truck drivers are not seeing them on the windshields and on the trucks.
Within 100 miles of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf Coast, there's hardly any flying bugs. And I notice even here in south central Missouri, a dramatic decrease in flying bugs that end up on the windshield during warm weather. And I don't know if there's been any consensus on why the die-off is occurring, but there's no doubt that it is. And there's also no doubt that the world we live in and expect to live in can't exist without insects, can it, Jim?
Yeah, exactly. And the prognosis that I've seen and heard is glyphosate, Roundup.
Well,
that's killing everything.
Right. Well, glyphosate is certainly near the top of the list, if not the top of the list of suspects for the die-off of the insects. Serious stuff. And I've seen absolutely no mainstream media attention to this and very limited alternative media to this topic, Jim.
Yeah, no, that's in other countries. Well, let's just put it this way. Let's look at Russia and other countries. I think like Romania and a long laundry list of Eastern European countries have banned Monsanto and glyphosate, and they don't have a problem. Things like this are the turning points in history. It's not that we have a better military. It's not that we spent more money. It's not that we live in nicer houses. We're talking about major changes, social, economic changes that will take the United States down to its knees. Right, where those countries are. I did a expose on Cuba last week on my show, and Cuba is one of the foremost countries in the world because they were forced to live organically. I mean, they did not have anything modern, so they had literally, no choice. Yeah, they had no choice.
Right.
And so today they are a major player in the world as far as food. There's no infant hunger in Cuba, and I have that confirmed from these were UNICEF studies that I was quoting. That Cuba is not contributing to the world superpopulation. And I had a listener write in and say, well, I can't believe that the United States doesn't have such a problem. I said, no, it does. The United States is one of the worst countries in the world for overpopulation, and it's in the illegal sector. It's not on the radar. We have 50 million illegal aliens in the U.S., and they're having babies like crazy. This is what happened in India in the 1950s. And now they have 1.2 billion people. You hit that exponential cusp in the population growth between right now, today, between the United States and Mexico, that's 500 million people. So if you consider that as one country, which you may as well, that's incredible. And the number of babies that are in the United States, the illegals and the ones in Mexico, with a little bit better health care than they had when I lived there back in the early 70s. When they had a 1/3 mortality rate, 1/3 of the kids died before they were age 3 when I was there. That was the mortality rate in Mexico. Now it's not that way. And so they are literally doubling their population every 10 years. And now they're doing it in the United States with better health care. So you take that 50 million and you drop that another, 100 in the next 10 years, you have now pushed into, you're like skidding into 1 billion people in the United States and Mexico. So it doesn't matter if they go back or forth or where they are. That's just the population reality.
Right.
That's awesome. That is.
It's very sobering. It's very sobering.
And Russia does not have that problem. Russia has about 140 million people and a very stable economy and good food.
And they control their borders.
And they have very wise use of their resources.
Absolutely.
A good economic system. All of those other countries, because of the United States feigning them, have become very strong. When you pressure your enemy, they become strong. You got to realize that. That's what happened to Japan. Japan just about won World War II.
The last component for their own nuclear weapon was on a German submarine headed to Japan. When the war ended, that German submarine turned around, and I don't know where they went, but they didn't go to Japan. Jim, we got a caller on hold here. We got Glenn in Philadelphia. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Professor McCanny.
Good morning.
Hi. You mentioned the many ice ages. I once heard a climatologist on a radio program say that these many ice ages can have their onset in as few as like 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
Like 3 years. So you might get three warning seasons, and then the seasons, and then, or years, and then the thing sets in earnest. And then next thing you know, you're ice skating on the River Thames,
Well, the next thing you know, you're not eating.
Yeah, exactly.
And the story is in the Scandinavian countries, the grain, the bakers controlled the grain, of course, because they were the bakers. And so the story was that they realized that this ice age was serious, so they hoarded the grain, and those people lived through. And there was just massive starvation because there was no food. And I don't care what kind of crops you're growing, whether it's GMO or whatever. If you're missing those weeks of growing season, then sayonara.
Right.
Hold that thought, gentlemen. Hold that thought. We've got a break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. Thank you. All right, we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 24th of January. Jim, before we get back to our conversation, tell people how they can listen to your 2 live radio shows in the archives, if you would, please, sir.
Yeah, John, every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Central Time from WWCR Nashville, Tennessee is the James McCanny Science Hour at the Crossroads. That's my show that's been on there for about 17 years now, and which I discuss current events, science issues, and other general topics that affect the public, things you won't hear anyplace else. And then the paid cast, that show, by the way, re-airs many times. All that information on my webpage, which, John, you have a link to my webpage on your page.
Right.
And then my paid cast, $3.95 a month for an extra hour every week of topics dealing with pure science issues. And this month, January, I'm dealing with solutions to large-scale world problems.
All right. Outstanding. Glenn, do you have some follow-up comments, sir, before we move on?
Yes. The other thing I wanted to mention, Jim, by the way, I think WWCR can be listened to on the Internet, too, if somebody doesn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I say. There are many, many ways to listen. WWCR streams, WWCR.com. I'm on Tower 2 currently, and you can pick your method of listening. But, yeah, all that's described on my webpage, yes.
Okay.
WTWW Friday night also streams.
Oh, very good, very good. The other thing I wanted to mention was the physical biomass of insects on the Earth, I know, is like several times that of humans. So, like the insects on the Earth outweigh us by, I don't know, something like 5 times or something like that, the human mass. And insects are a very important part of the environment. And I know that I've had many fewer insects the past couple summers around the light outside my back porch. And again, almost none on the windshield and stuff like that. So we've seen a great decrease in insects that correlates with a great decrease in songbirds as well. So we don't have nearly, I remember we had a much greater diversity and a greater population of songbirds in the suburbs of Philadelphia when I was a kid than we do now. So
when I was a kid, they had a thing called DDT, which was, of course, also developed for warfare. But they stopped using it because they realized that the bird eggs became soft and the eggs would never hatch. So they actually stopped using it for environmental reasons, and then replaced it with Roundup, and with no testing, obviously, at all. But the country now is in very poor condition. When driving through, I think it was like Nebraska one summer in the fall, the corn looked amazing, and you come along to a farm where they didn't plant, and it looked like a nuclear bomb hit right up to the fence wall. Because nothing would grow there. Maybe a little, very scraggly weed was out in the middle. That was it. And that's what happens when you use glyphosate annually on the ground. It just kills everything, kills all the seeds, and you're left with basically desert.
Yeah, boy.
Okay.
Yeah, we keep doing things wrong.
And it's very poisonous. That's why one of the main things my filters take out is glyphosate. It takes out thousands of things, but glyphosate is the main target because you cannot drink that stuff. That's why the cancer rate in the U.S. is soaring. Cancer has become the number one killer for adults in the United States, overtaking heart disease, whatever that is.
Yeah. Not so good. We are sophomores, educated fools, it seems. I think about the Bible talking about Jesus coming back to destroy those who are destroying the earth. I think moderns have thought of that primarily in terms of nuclear warfare, but it seems that we're finding all sorts of ways to defile our own environment. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you. Have a good day. Take care.
Glenn, thank you for the call. Cancer is the modern plague, isn't it, Jim?
Oh, yeah. And the thing is it's cumulative. So the people who are going to be dying from cancer in 5 years are walking around like life is good.
Right.
There are places in the United States that have banned glyphosate and GMO. You can find them, but there are places in the U.S.
Well, good for them. Good for them. I'm glad to hear that. We have another caller here. We have Tony in North Dakota. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning there, John and Jim. I just have a comment. I was listening and you were talking about decrease in insects, and And this summer, we're on a little ranch out here, about 8 acres, but we're surrounded by farmland. But we commented this morning, or this spring, on the vast decrease. The flies didn't show up till July. That's never happened before.
Right.
And so the barn swallow, the numbers were about half of what they have normally been. So just want to let you know we observe the same thing up here.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Tony. We got a break. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 24th of January. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. You can spend a lot of time there. There's lots of excellent information that you can read up on and educate yourself, entertain yourself, and so forth right there at my website at thelibertyman.com. And, of course, the energy cleaners. This is my home business. I use my energy cleaner every night. I'm pretty active around the ranch here, often on tractors, up and down ladders, down on my knees doing concrete work. I'm now doing my workouts, doing my sit-ups and push-ups and stretching. And I go to bed with minor aches and pains. Of course I do. I wake up in the morning, however, pain-free, plenty of energy, ready to hit it again because of my energy cleaner. You can also. Only $285 shipping included. If you've got arthritis pain, joint pain, back pain, you need an energy cleaner. As of 24 days ago, we now have a 90-day money-back guarantee. You can't lose anything with the energy cleaner. Just get it, check it out, and incorporate it into your life. I do take PayPal, MasterCard, Visa. PayPal now takes payments, by the way, if you live in the USA. If you need to mail me a check, my address is at my website at thelibertyman.com. Be sure and check out the factory-made fitted mattress pads that go with the energy cleaner. It's a great combination. Toll-free our line 24 hours a day. Here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. We're visiting with Professor James McCanney. His website's linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com. Taking your questions, calls, and comments here at Republic Broadcasting at 800-313-9443. Jim, I got a follow-up on Tony's comment. I was at, this past summer, I was at several outdoor events involving food, barbecue, and so forth, where there were 16 feet of tables full of all kinds of tasty, fresh food, fruits, vegetables, desserts, meat. And at each event, I pointed out to some of the guests, some friends of mine, I said, look at that food, and they look at it, and I say, what's missing? And they look, and they don't know what to say. And I say, what's missing is flies. We're in a country, and we've got all this fresh, tasty food exposed to the air with not covered up, and we could count maybe one or two flies around, and that was it. That's so off the charts crazy, Jim. It's hard to imagine, but that's exactly what's going on here. You have any follow-up before we move on?
Well, when I was a kid, I'd go out and visit my friend on his farm, and we had flies every place. I mean, it was a real old-fashioned one-tractor farm out in the middle of the country. And, yeah, when we had picnics or even in the house, if we had food on the table, in fact, that was one of the welcome things of fall and winter is there were no flies.
Right.
But, yeah, flies were a part of everything. And, you know, they were just there in abundance.
You know, as much as we don't like them, as aggravating as they are, our world cannot exist without insects. Our next caller is Ty in Austin, Texas. Good morning, Ty.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's been a while since I've been able to tune in, so I hope both of you have been doing great in this new year. We haven't quite seen the insect problem down here in Texas yet. After this hard freeze we've had, not why I called, but just to kind of smooth in with that. The only thing I can say is in the 20 years I've been here in Texas, I've seen a decrease in the large insects. All of our small insect population seems to be very healthy. But anyway, John, I just once again have to commend your show. I haven't tuned in for months. I've been very, very busy in some self-study and just haven't been able to do so. But it only takes listening to you for 2 days, and already, dots get connected. Complimenting Rick in Missouri, I think it was yesterday, talking about gardening and using the double insulated caterpillar gardening. When we start thinking about a very rapid onset of cold weather and a change in the amount of growing days, those of us who are seeking to complete our task here in 2018, John's Challenge, and get our hobby farm going, that seems like the no-brainer way to go. And if we're going to see a heavy onset of that in rapid fashion and not drawn out over 15, 20 years, well, there's a market there as well.
Right.
All of that tied together with Professor McCanney's wing generator. Now you start talking about being able to generate electricity, keep those things lit when they need to be lit, double insulated from the cold, also insulated from the chemicals falling from the sky. So anyways, your show's awesome, John, and I also want to publicly thank Rick in Missouri for a comment one day last year that started me on a path that has actually started to make me quite wealthy. He mentioned Cliff High, which led me to, in my self-study, into the cryptos. And so, Rick, if you're out there listening, thanks, buddy. Sure appreciate you, and
okay.
Sure appreciate both of you guys there.
Okay, thanks for the call, Ty. We appreciate it. The book that describes that type of gardening, by the way, the title of the book is real simple, The Winter Harvest. I say again, The Winter Harvest. The author's name is Coleman, last name Coleman. This is the nature of radio, isn't it, Jim, where listeners learn from us, we learn from the listeners. That's radio at its best, isn't it, sir?
Oh, exactly, yeah, but just think of all those scripted radio shows like coming out of like MSNBC or, New York or Los Angeles that are just literally living on some other planet. I don't know which one, but, they're not here. And
right. Well, they talk about the important stuff, such as which Hollywood star is dating another Hollywood star, or
right.
or professional sports, or the important stuff. They make sure that gets covered.
Exactly, all the diversions, everything to keep you from really understanding, what you're here for. So, a million diversions. That's what it's all about. Just throw it out there like
right.
Like metal scraps coming out of an airplane that's getting shot at with a heat-seeking rocket,
Okay. All right. Well, if you've got a question or comment, ladies and gentlemen, the lines are open at 800-313-9443. Ty mentioned the wing generator. Have any updates on what's going on with the wing generator, Jim?
Yeah, and that's very soon. That's what I've been completely engrossed in here. And, so just a lot of things going on there. That's all I can tell you now. But very soon, major announcements. And by the way, people have been emailing me. I've got a note on my webpage with the webpage email address to email and just say wing generator in capital letters in the subject line. If you live on a farm or a ranch or a place that could use serious power, just email me and we'll put you on a list and then study the locations and for people who would be the first in line, so to speak, for the rollout that's going on right now. So, and it doesn't depend on the order you wrote in. It depends on the quality of your site, and other factors. So anyway,
right.
But that's very important, is for people to become energy independent. And those people who have the worst electricity pay the highest prices, and especially farms and ranches. Some of them pay horrendous amounts of money for electricity.
Right.
And to take that money and put it back in their pocket would be just, a major gain for these people. So anyway.
Well, that's good. I know it's parts of this country. I know northern Missouri, once you're north of the Missouri River, it seems like the wind is constant all day, every day, is what my observation is.
Yeah, there are places, and with that kind of beginning, this will grow into, it's absurd. Burning inert matter, whether it's coal or natural gas or nuclear. What people don't talk about is the amount of work that goes into preparing those fuels and getting them to the point where you can burn them. That's not even talked about. Or one of the funniest things for me is that wind blows all the time. These stupid 3-blade wind generators simply don't work. The fact that solar, which is only available a couple hours a day, can beat the wind generators is hilarious. So people like the American Wind Energy Association or the Canadian Wind Energy Association, you see that they're made up of General Electric and the big companies that sell those monstrosity pieces of garbage. And the reason they're getting their money, the reason it's economically viable, is because of government subsidies.
Right.
None of that would be there if they were not being paid through the electric companies and the government. And they're all making money off of this. But a little fun fact, there's 88,000 wind generators in the United States right now, and at an average of 1.5 megawatts each is their rating, which they don't do at all. But if they did, they could replace all the nuclear power plants in the United States, but we have never had a nuclear power plant shut down because of wind power. They don't work. They don't work. And so the very simple explanation is the wind just blows right through them. It's like putting 2 sticks out in the wind, or let's say 3. Let's be generous.
Right.
And a 30-mile-an-hour wind, the wind is just blowing right through them. They don't do anything. So the end result is that it's designed, they're designed not to work, because the central power companies hold the reins, and that's been that way since the very beginning, since Westinghouse bought the technology from Tesla. That has been the goal. Morgan and all those guys shut down anything that would provide the public with reasonable energy. Selling energy has been the profit. That has been the world economy has been based on that since the 1900s. How absolutely ridiculous.
It is. Well, we're anxiously awaiting the wing generator projects to move forward and really take hold and start helping our country here, Jim.
Yeah, it'll literally the future. It will be, and it's already happening. So, just keep tuned for more general releases and larger systems, things like that.
Well, we'll do that. Our next caller is Dave in Texas. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, John, James, great discussion as usual. By the way, before I forget, the Friday show that you guys have with the Survival Radio, very good show, right. Very, very informative like that.
Thank you.
I had input. I've been doing this small hobby farm thing for a number of years now. If you're going to do the tunnel greenhouse concept to extend your growing season, make sure that you use UV stabilized plastic. If you go out to the box store and buy a big roll of the clear plastic, that's going to last you 1 season, maybe 2, and it's going to fall apart. So go to a farm store website and get the UV stabilized stuff, and that will last a number of seasons.
Right. That's good advice. Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Ultraviolet is some tough stuff, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking for very long term, here's an industry that existed, and I talk about this even in my book, Atlantis to Tesla, The Colburn Connection, that glass is relatively easy to make, and it should be a cottage industry making glass plates.
Really?
So, yeah, and it's something that doesn't exist today. We get our glass, you go to the store and buy it.
Right.
But glass is very important, and in an economy where we had cold, getting glass locally would be something very important. And there again, it's an energy issue.
Right. I was amazed. I was reading an article about Cuba, how they learned, the Cubans learned how to fabricate windshields for these 1955, 1956 automobiles they had in such abundance. And I found that quite amazing, that they could fabricate windshields for automobiles in a home workshop, essentially. I found it truly amazing, don't you?
Oh, yeah. No, it's a good indicator, though. And like I said, if you stress your enemy, so-called enemy, Cuba really was never a threat. But if you stress your enemy, they become stronger. And that's what happened with Cuba. They're number one in the world in all kinds of things today. They have more doctors per capita. They have the lowest cancer rate. Just go down the laundry list. All the problems in the U.S., the drug problem, the immigration problem, they don't have any of it. They don't have overpopulation. They control their borders. And,
they do. If you try to escape, you go to jail.
Well, people can leave Cuba, but that's a protection mechanism.
Right.
And
right.
you have to understand is that they are protecting themselves against the World Bank. And that's one of the ugly realities that they had to deal with, is how do you keep the World Bank, that's like this monster octopus coming at you from all directions, how do you keep that entity out of your country? And so if you look at the core of many of those issues in Cuba, that's what you have to look at first.
Okay. Well, I know Americans do vacation there, and I've known a couple of people, and I say, why would you vacation to a prison? Because Cuba is one vast prison. If you can't leave without being put in jail, you're obviously in a prison, regardless of how good the health care is and no cancer. Okay, where do you want to go next to, Jim?
Did we talk about the false nuclear alarm in Hawaii? Did we talk about that on the air?
I'm not sure that you and I did. There's been some slight evidence that they may have shot something down that morning. Some witnesses out in some kind of boat out in the ocean claim they saw something blow up in the atmosphere about the same time. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
I don't know. I don't know at all. But the idea that this was somehow some guy who, instead of picking up his cigarette, pushed the wrong button is ludicrous. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. So the excuse didn't make any sense. So the real story,
we may never know. We may never know the real story. Here's our last break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 24th of January, visiting with Professor McCanney, whose website's linked to my links page. We got our last caller here, Rick in Missouri. Rick, are your ears burning?
Oh, yeah, well, yes and no. I texted Ty. you'd like to think you're, being of use to somebody, but you're never really quite sure. So now I feel good about myself. I almost hate to, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm listening. We're listening. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be brief then. I almost hate to bring this up. 2 weeks ago or so, some fella called in talking about a symposium. I think it was with the Lakota Indian Nation. MIT was supposed to show up and do something with regard to cold fusion. I can't find one single thing about it. And, Professor, for all I know right now, I'm telling Polish jokes. Maybe this was just a big joke on us. Or did it actually happen? Is there anything to any of this?
I don't know myself.
Right. Well, as far as I got a follow-up email from the man I had on, my guest, and he said the event went well. That's all I know. Well,
I'll be doggone. All right. Well, I've got the book. I've got the Wing Generator book, but I would look forward to the Cold Fusion book as well. So.
Okay. We'll see.
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks a million.
We shall see. Yeah.
I'll talk to you. Yes.
Yeah, that's been a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for the call. We appreciate it, Rick. Jim, we're down to about the last 3 minutes here. What word do you want to get out this week?
Well, the whole discussion about greenhouses is very interesting, and what I would encourage people to look into, this on a bit larger scale, is doming over, could you imagine doming over large-scale areas? If you look like at a downtown of a city, the majority of the region is covered with buildings. So if you wouldn't have to dome that much to put a dome over the whole area, and that would of course keep it warm. And but if you're looking out in the country, if you could dome over something the size of a, say, football field, you could live in a very northern climate and have crops growing all year long, it would change your little local climate. But anyway, that's maybe just dreaming a bit. But if we actually head into cooling regions, we might have to look at such things, doming over larger tracts. I made some calculations once with organic farming. I forget how much, like a 400 square mile region of Iowa would be enough to provide the entire world with food. I forget the exact statistics, but it's not much, which means that all the crops that are being grown over all of these states are going for other reasons, not food. Finding food in a cooling climate is possible, but it's going to take some planning and some doing.
Absolutely. Jim, that's a great way to end the show. We appreciate you being with us. Look forward to having you back next Wednesday.
Thank you, John.
Okay, that's it for this hour. We got a second hour. I'm expecting a special guest to show up, and when he does, I will introduce him. Stay tuned. All right, we're back with Jim and J.R. Moore here, our second hour on Wednesday, the 24th of January. Prepper tip of the day. It's 3 websites. These are places where you can bid and or buy on government surplus. 3 websites. One is government related. The other 2 are private that work with the government. And here's those 3 websites. First is GSA, that's Golf Sierra Alpha, GSAauctions.gov. That's the government-related one. The next one is Gov, that's Golf Oscar Victor, GovLiquidation.com, GovLiquidation.com. And last but not least, GovDeals.com, GovDeals.com. You need to be cautious, do your due diligence. If you want to buy something that's expensive, be sure you check it out personally first, and be aware where these things are located. You may end up buying something that's 1,000 or 2,000 miles or even 3,000 miles. It's a big country away from where you are. So it can be a lot of fun just seeing what's there. You never know what's going to pop up on these websites for sale. It could be a carton full of socks. It could be a a small warship. I mean, it's just amazing. So check that out. That's our corporate tip of the day. We have patient waiting in the green room, my friend Jeff Nyquist. Jeff has been on my show a number of times, not any time recently, unfortunately. I apologize for the oversight. Jeff's website is jrnyquist.com, jrnyquist.com, and his website is linked on my links page at thelibertyman.com. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, John.
Well, it's good to have you back. I don't even want to try to think how long it's been since you've been on with me, but some topics came up recently, and you came to mind, and I thought, well, I'm just going to get a hold of Jeff and see if he'll come back on here. You've been doing your work on this thing involving communists and the communist conspiracy for about how many years, Jeff?
Oh, more than 30 years now.
Really? Now, refresh my memory.
1987, yeah.
My recollection is that you were an intelligence analyst in the U.S. military.
No, I never had that job. No,
nope. You never had that job. Okay. Well, I was mistaken. I thought you were another intelligence analyst like I was. Well, I'm here at your website. Very well done, by the way. Easy to read. We've got a kind of a tan background with nice bold black letters on it, and blue when there's something to click onto. There was an article I was talking about last week, and let's see. Let's see which one it was. I think it might have been. They're all so good. Here it is. This is the one I was talking about. Golitsyn's methodology and the Trump administration. And of course, you're talking about Anatoly Golitsyn. I quote Anatoly Golitsyn frequently. But the premise of today's show, and I'm going to set the stage here for you, Jeff, and we'll have our discussion. First of all, I'm not restricting this to Hussein Obama. I'm going back all the way to Ronald Reagan, basically. But Hussein Obama was the worst in my opinion. For 8 years, this man appointed Muslims, communists, and Muslim communists to head various agencies, who in turn made appointments of more communists, Muslims, or communist Muslims, who in turn hired more Muslims or communists or communist Muslims. I'm grouping them as three different groups. Muslims stand alone, communists stand alone, and Muslim communists stand alone, which is what Hussein Obama is, a Muslim communist. So for 8 years, these appointments and hirings went on, which means, in my opinion, based on what I know, there's no doubt hundreds, possibly thousands of Muslims and or communists and or Muslim communists scattered throughout the various federal agencies. Your response, sir?
Yeah, the country has been penetrated by hostile elements. They target the intelligence agencies and corporations. They targeted Congress. The United States, back in, I think it was in 1935, the FBI gave a report saying there were something like 5,000 or 6,000 communists in the United States government working for the government, suggesting that President Roosevelt at the time should, get them out of government. And Roosevelt kind of laughed at the report. He didn't want to do that. He didn't think there was anything wrong with having thousands of so-called communists in the government. Some of his best friends were communists, or so he said at the time. It became a real problem, for Congress later, when they realized that departments of the government had communists basically running them, like the Assistant Secretary of the Treasurer, Harry Dexter White, was a Soviet agent and may have been responsible in something called Operation Snow for provoking the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor, which was a Soviet operation to cause a war between Japan and the United States. It's quite possible that the policies at the end of World War II that led to the collapse of Eastern Europe under Soviet communism was, due to agents within the Roosevelt administration, Soviet agents. And we never got all of them out. And look, the ones that the congressional investigations exposed and got out of government in the 50s were right back in government by the end of the 1960s. So we never fixed the problem. And then we made it worse. We got rid of congressional oversight. The Committee on Un-American Activities in the House was suspended. And we don't really have counterintelligence in this country. We don't investigate subversive organizations. And so we had Barack Hussein Obama, who was himself mentored by a communist, Frank Marshall Davis. He was groomed to be president. He became president. He brought communists into government. And are we surprised that we elect a Republican president and he's immediately accused of being a Russian agent?
Right. By
the same people who are.
Right.
Probably Russian agents.
I got a follow-up for you, Jeff, on something, a comment you just made. I was at a public meeting, this is about, 12, 13 years ago, regarding a Superfund cleanup site near St. Louis called Times Beach, where there was this the government came in and basically bought up all the homes and because of alleged contamination in the soil. So I'm at this meeting. It took place in a church, and it was maybe 30 men and women. I'm sitting next to a young man, probably early to mid-30s, and we're just having kind of a casual conversation. And he mentions the following. He says that he had been a member of and been trained by the IWW. Now, I know what the IWW is, and hardly anybody does, and I'm sure you do. It's International Workers of the World, also called the Wobblies, which is a old communist group that's been around since the 1920s or 30s. I thought they'd all retired or died, but obviously they're not. So the next day I call up an FBI agent that I knew and had a personal relationship with, and I said, I got some hot stuff for you, some great information. I have located, and I got contact number, the name and phone number of this young communist. I said, I've got the name and contact information of a communist agent, and I want to provide that to you. So the FBI agent says, well, John, unfortunately, our agent, the FBI, no longer investigates communists. And I said, what? What do you mean you no longer investigate communists? He says, yeah, John, it's no longer part of our mission statement. We no longer keep track of, we no longer investigate, we no longer care about communists. So he, from the tone of his voice, he was a bit dismayed that was the way it was, but, you know, he's got his job to do, and if he doesn't follow the protocols in the mission statement, he would lose his job and lose his pension. So obviously that was going no place. So that's where we are, Jeff, where we have known communists that are not being monitored, not being surveilled, and they're just allowed to apparently freely operate. Is that your observation also?
Yeah. Well, not only that, they've entered the federal government. The President of the United States was one of them. President Barack Obama. I think it's, a guy who was mentored by communists, who was a communist in college. We have testimony from people who were communists with him in college. He believed in the Marxist-Leninist revolution in college. He never has talked about that. He's never said, well, I was a communist, but, I grew out of it. I participated in Marxist scholar conferences, but I no longer believe in it. Blah, blah, blah. No, he didn't have a conversion experience away from communism because he's never talked about it. He hid it. Right. And then if you look at his policies, when he was president, he wanted to get rid of our nuclear weapons. Who would want to do that? When he was president, he did everything to bankrupt the country. We went from an outrageous $10 trillion or $9 trillion indebtedness to $20 trillion indebtedness.
Right.
And he did that through policies calculated to break the bank. So is he a communist? Was he? I've read, my friend Trevor Lawson has written a couple of books. And, Trevor makes a very powerful case because, you look at Valerie Jarrett, you look at other people around the president. Yeah, this Brennan, this CIA director admitted that he voted for Gus Hall in 1980. Gus Hall, the candidate of the Communist Party USA. Right. The head of the CIA admits he was voting for a communist president.
And he also is a Muslim, by the way. So,
Well, yeah, like the Muslim Brotherhood is, I was talking to a reporter from Epoch Times, the dissident website of dissident anti-communist Chinese, and he had been doing research about how the Muslim Brotherhood was like a communist front set up decades ago to try to bring the Muslim world into communism. And he believes from his research, and I don't, it makes sense to me, but I don't know the details. It was fascinating to listen to him, that the Muslim Brotherhood was always a communist front, that the Muslim Brotherhood is merely just, and I had, there was a lady from the intelligence community that was an expert in Iran that I met last year, and she had, she worked on Iran for the intelligence some years ago, and she said that the entire leadership of clerical leadership of Muslim Iran were educated in the Soviet Union and were probably KGB agents.
I've read similar things, Jeff, that the schools that teach the imams were infiltrated and taken over in the 60s and 70s by the communists, and that just confirms what I already knew from other sources, what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that it's really Islam that we're dealing with, and not a Islamic, a communist front using Islam as a front to advance the revolution. There's a statement I just found yesterday made by Brezhnev in a book that Brezhnev wrote about the Iranian Revolution back in the 70s, 1979. And Brezhnev makes this statement. He says, well, we're not against religions and stuff. And we got to understand that the way Islam is, we can work with religions. And so we can praise the Iranian Revolution because it is a revolution akin to our own. This is the head of the Soviet Union. I mean, Islam, right? They're supposed to hate atheists, communist atheism.
They're supposed to.
How is Brezhnev suddenly buddies with them, right?
Right. Well, they have common goals, and that's the destruction of the West and destruction of Christianity, so they do have a common goal, don't they?
Yeah. And not only have they, a Muslim, but I had a book that came out in Germany a year ago last November, and a German Muslim. I have had some long discussions with him. He's a reader of mine, and he pointed out, he says, you're Christian, Islam has a problem. It's infiltrated by the communists and being used. And he said, you have the same problem with your Christian churches. And then he just pointed to the current Pope Francis. And I thought, well, he's got me there.
Right.
If their religion was infiltrated, and he said, you can't fairly criticize modern Islam without realizing it's been hijacked by communists. And he says, your Catholic Church is being hijacked by communists right now, or your Protestant churches how many Protestant denominations have been hijacked by communists at the national level? Presbyterian Church USA, you think?
Right.
As an example? Yeah, right. I think so.
Right. Well, this is a very, very serious matter that most Americans don't have a clue even exists, do they, Jeff?
No, and it's a problem, is that Americans aren't exercising their citizenship. They wouldn't know a communist if it bit them.
No.
I mean, they'd have no idea what's going on. This has been going on for more than a century now, since the Bolshevik Revolution more than a century ago. There's an interesting book written in the 1920s, and I'm trying to think what the title is. It's like Red Revolution or something. And we had the communists tried to make a revolution in this country shortly after the Bolshevik Revolution. They shot at servicemen returning from World War I in parades. They agitated. They tried to blow up the Attorney General in his house, U.S. Attorney General in Washington. They threw a bomb through his front window. Luckily did not kill him. That's Attorney General Palmer. There was the Palmer raid. And one of the things people don't remember is that the communists operated a big educational summer camp in Wisconsin, Michigan. And it was raided by federal agents. They found barrels full of documents how to infiltrate churches, how to infiltrate school boards, how to get elected to local office. how to get into the federal government. There's a giant educational program for infiltrating all the important positions of American society to influence them as a part of a coordinated long-term effort. In the 1920s, they were educating their members to do this.
Well, they've had considerable success, and they know how to focus. They have limited resources, and they focus those limited resources on critical points where they can have the most impact, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Look, how many cities have people on their city councils, or how many boards of supervisors have people on their boards of supervisors who are actually communists?
I'm sure there's many all over the country. Here, break, Jeff, we got a break here. Call number is 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. Thank you. All right, we are back here on Wednesday, the 24th January, visiting with Jeff Nyquist, the author of Origins of the Fourth World War, available for sale at his website at jrnyquist.com. That's linked to my links page, by the way, at libertyman.com. Jeff, is your book also available at Amazon?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right, that makes it handy.
As well as other books that I've written, like the new Tactics of Global War is the book that I did a couple of years ago. And, of course, I co-authored with Cliff Kincaid the Red Jihad. And I also was a co-author in Back from the Dead, Return of the Evil Empire.
Okay. You need to get those on your website here, Jeff. I don't see them here. So do a little update.
Yeah. I'm not a super great advertiser type, you know. It's like people have to kind of be a little interested, which surprisingly people aren't.
Well, you got your brother's books listed here, so you need to get your own up there too. Just a general reminder. Okay. This communist infiltration goes back to 1917, of course. The goal in 1917 remains unchanged for the communists to dominate the world economically, politically, culturally, militarily. And that hasn't changed a bit, has it?
No. It's world revolution. They want to destroy capitalism, by the way, which is the organic, natural system of human civilization. Freedom, free market, free government. They want to destroy that and replace it with a system that has no history. It's called communism, which they don't know how to make communism because there's never been a communist society. Well, maybe Stone Age society was communist, you know, according to some anthropologists. if you only have stone tools, you can make a communist society because there's no real property except for what stones you pick up on the ground and fashion into weapons,
right,
or tools. So it's a very strange philosophy, but if you read the history of Karl Marx, who invented modern communism, Karl Marx didn't really believe in it. He just wanted to be dictator of Germany, and it was to have a revolution. He could. This was the rationale for taking power in the name of the workers or the people.
Right. Reality is the public face of communism is everybody's equal. Nobody owns any property. Reality is there's an oligarchy of a very few people who own everything, isn't it?
Yeah, basically that's right. All human social systems are hierarchical. There's what Robert Michel's iron law of oligarchy, which means that even if you have to organize to create equality or democracy, that organization is unequal and undemocratic, basically. I mean, that was Robert Michel is a political scientist famous for writing a book called Political Parties over 100 years ago. And yes, all human systems are oligarchical. That is, they're ruled from the top. And communism, if it claims otherwise, it's just lying because there's no such thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What's a famous quotation from Animal Farm? All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Yeah, George Orwell. Yeah, Animal Farm. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Napoleon the pig ends up ruling everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been told there's about 20 families in China that could pay off the American national debt of $20 trillion if they chose to.
Yeah, probably. Of course, we have the option of not repaying that debt. So the Chinese are in a funny position because they predicated everything they have on bankrupting us, but they suddenly find themselves in the position that if they bankrupt us, they bankrupt themselves as well.
Right. Well,
it's typical of communist schemes, by the way. They often end up in this horrible backfiring kind of thing.
Right. Well, they were willing to murder 50 million of their own people to achieve their goals. So I believe they're capable of doing anything to achieve their goals. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, they're capable of killing 50 million Americans, or maybe 300 million. There was a speech by the Chi Hao-chen, the Chinese defense minister, in 2005 about exterminating the United States, doing a genocidal attack on the U.S., even mentioned using biological weapons or fashioning a new biological weapon to kill us all. It's a rather terrifying speech, and it was given before party cadres in secret in 2005. You can't find very many people here who want to talk about it.
Well, we're talking about it, Jeff. We're getting the word out right now on Wednesday, the 24th of January.
That's it. Most people don't know about things like this.
No. Well, we're getting the word out. Here's our break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our energy cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the energy cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the energy cleaner, $70 off retail and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 24th of January. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. Our project, and it's truly our project, the listeners and myself doing this, and I could not do it without the listeners, locating images of continents with new coastlines and television shows, movies, occasionally a magazine, maybe a poster. We got the earliest one going back to 1952. If you find an image of a continent with new coastlines, get that image screen capture to me, and you get your choice of any of my 5 DVDs as a thank you. Great project. Let's move forward with it. Also, my website, of course, are the Energy Cleaner. This is my home business. If you got arthritis pain, joint pain, or back pain, what are you waiting for? You're procrastinating? The Energy Cleaner now comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Only $285, shipping included. Be sure and check out the factory-made fitted mattress pads. Most people are going ahead and getting the mattress pad with the Energy Cleaner initially. It's a great way to get started. I do take PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, and, of course, you can send me a check if you need to. My address is at the website at thelibertyman.com. Toll-free our line 24 hours a day. Here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website's linked on my links page at thelibertyman.com. His book is titled The Origins of the Fourth World War. If you got a question or a comment, give us a call at 800-313-9443. Well, Jeff, you're on the West Coast, and when I had my early time slot from 6 to 8 a.m. Central Time, that would have been 4 to 6 a.m. Pacific Time. It just wasn't doable to get you on here. But now that I have this time slot, it's a bit more workable for your schedule, isn't it?
Yeah, it works. It's doable.
Okay, that's good to know. You do any public speaking, Jeff, at all?
Yeah, when I'm invited. Yeah, I do some. Yeah, I spoke in Milwaukee in May. I spoke at a Brazilian event in New York in October.
Okay.
I've been involved with events. Watching closely events in Brazil and working with Brazilians to educate people there about communism. They're having a counter-revolution against communism in Brazil.
Well, good for them.
It's quite fascinating.
Good for them. Have the communists obtained any positions of power in Brazil? I'm not aware of what.
Oh yeah. The Workers' Party got power. They elected 2 presidents, and then they started to loot the country. And they were sending money from the country to Cuba and to Venezuela and to the narcos in Colombia. And the Brazilian people and the Brazilian army found out about it, and they started protesting and fighting back. And they impeached, Lula da Silva is in jail. That's the first communist president under the Workers' Party. And then Dilma Rousseff was impeached. And of course, they're in this kind of in-between place where they're forming a new conservative anti-communist political party. I had the chance to meet the gentleman that's going to head it, and they're having elections next fall, and they're hoping to get a real anti-communist government in power and, block the Chinese from exploiting their economy, block the Russians, stop the communists that have infiltrated their government. They did the same process that's going on here, became very advanced in Brazil.
I'd say so, because we weren't able to impeach our communist president. We let him serve out his full 8 years. It's so ironic, Jeff. I don't know if you saw Sheriff Arpaio's investigators' report on the Hussein Obama's birth certificate being a computer-generated fraudulent document fabrication or not, but as you know, Jeff, I've spent most of my adult life dealing with real evidence in real courts, both civil and criminal matters. And I'll tell you, Jeff, that I was I regard Sheriff O'Pira's investigation of the birth certificate as what might be called clear and convincing evidence that the birth certificate released by the Obama administration was, in fact, a computer-generated forgery. Do you have any response to that before we get to our next caller?
It's pretty fascinating. I did read the report at the time, and it's fascinating. But of course, if there's something in Obama's background, perhaps that his father is not his father, or there's something else there about his birth that they wanted to hide. It's fascinating. What is it that they're hiding? What is the truth there?
That's a good question, and I hope we finally get an answer. And if he wasn't qualified to serve as or be elected president, it would be a constitutional crisis and a legal crisis, because it may certainly invalidate everything that he signed during those 8 years. It would be quite a dilemma, but I'm sure it would be resolved in some manner. We've got a caller and holder. We've got Fred in Wisconsin. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning.
Go ahead, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Yes, Jeff, you were talking about this thing with the communists and how, there's 3 or 4 of them that can just pay off everything. I heard something, and I started looking at this real hard, where under the Obama administration, they flew to China and they signed some papers. And at first it seemed like, just some kind of a treaty or something like that. But then it came out that what they have done is basically ruined us. Well, they put us in a position where all government-owned land, all that stuff out west, all of this is under an agreement that if we belly up, the Chinese move in and take it. And I wondered if you could comment on anything like that.
Jeff?
I have heard of it. There are so many of these schemes. It's hard to keep up with them all. I mean, one of the things the communists do is that they create different schemes. Like global warming is a communist scheme. It was invented by a Politburo member in the Central Committee of the Communist Party Soviet Union around 1980. He was their science guy. He was a Politburo member in the Soviet Union who was involved in science. I wrote a long article on my website about him. And they determined that global warming was something that they could put over on people. Nuclear winter is another one, talking about weather. This business now, people are discovering that heart disease is not caused by animal fat. It's caused by eating sugar. And so the whole non-fat movement, well, my friend Trevor Loudon informed me that the researcher that invented this idea that animal fat's bad for you was a Communist Party member.
Right.
The homosexual movement, the radical homosexual movement was started by a Communist Party member. The radical feminist movement was started by communists.
You just go down the line, it seems.
Right.
Yeah, it's all of it is sabotage, and they're so busy with the sabotage, and people don't realize, telling women to be unsatisfied with being moms. I mean, if you're a Soviet general, what do you want to happen to the birth rate in the United States? You want it to decline so we don't have soldiers, because the Soviet birth rate's declining and they want ours to decline. So they have to create
my final comment on this whole thing is this. Have you ever listened to a guy named Brix Ware? He's out there. And he had a really scathing report about what's going on in the Grand Canyon, and that there's there's a military base that's built on one end. You're not allowed anywhere near it because of a huge amount of gold that they found in there many, many years ago. It was reported. He backed it up with newspaper articles at the turn of the century. And here's the thing, bottom line, if this happens and the Chinese are allowed to walk in and take over the Grand Canyon, you imagine taking our natural resources. They're just going to pillage this country.
Of course they will. That's a given.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Okay, Fred, we appreciate your call. The call number is 800-313-9443. What Fred says is 100% accurate, isn't it, Jim? I'm Jeff. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hadn't heard this about the Grand Canyon, but the Chinese are trying to get into the United States and exploit raw materials. And we've got politicians. Look at the Uranium One deal that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, participated in allowing. This is a deal to turn over 20% of our uranium over to Russia, to a Russian-controlled company. I mean, there are some researchers who are suggesting that uranium was used to build North Korean nuclear weapons and possibly Iranian nuclear weapons. So, it's incredible.
It is.
It
is. Well, Donald Trump and Trump's people that are part of his team, I believe they know and understand most of what you're saying, don't you, Jeff? I
don't know if they do. Honestly, I don't think that the National Security Advisor, Mr. McMaster, General McMaster, understands it. I don't know that John Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, understands it. Maybe Secretary of Defense Mattis understands it. I don't know.
Well, if anybody would, Mattis is known to be a voracious reader, and I would
Mattis, I think, has said publicly that Russia is a threat to the U.S. and he understands that. I think.
Right. Right.
So but the thing is that I wish the American public would hear more of the truth about the kind of weapons that Russia's building.
I agree. That needs to happen, and we're doing our little bit here to get the word out. They're in a hurry. They want to get their shiny new world order, which means the communist control of everything. They want to get that done, and they want to get it done now, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think they were hoping to get it done by the 100th anniversary of the revolution, because they're tired of pretending that they're not communist anymore. They're tired of pretending.
Really?
Putin basically spoke before an enormous communist gathering in Sochi, Russia, it was last October. It was a 30,000 communist youth, the biggest communist youth organization in the world, and he gave a speech saying, "Go for it. I'm behind you. I'm 100% with you. You're the greatest." This was his speech. Now, you tell me that he's a Christian and a conservative when he speaks before 30,000 communists and says, "I'm on your side. I'm with you. Go for it." That's not a conservative. He cannot be a Christian, and he's not. It's a disinformation campaign to trick conservatives like Patrick Buchanan, who has been duped, sadly, and it's disappointing to see how conservatives are just as easily turned into useful idiots as liberals used to be.
Right. Well, Putin's been observed publicly wearing a crucifix around his neck, hasn't he?
Well, that's something that he put a big show on. He went on Larry King with that crucifix back in 2000, October of 2000.
It's been that long ago.
And Larry King asked him about it. Yeah, Larry King asked him about it, and he gave the story about how the cross, this crucifix, miraculously survived a fire. And Larry King, he's kind of pushy, and Larry King said, well, give us, tell us what you believe in, tell us about your faith. And Putin wouldn't acknowledge Jesus Christ as a savior. And finally, Larry King, in frustration, what do you believe in? And Putin's answer was, I believe in the power of man, was the translation given verbally on the show. And that's a communist answer. I'm sorry.
It is. It's a classic. It is a classic communist answer. No doubt whatsoever.
A Christian doesn't say, I believe in the power of man. He says, I believe in Jesus Christ, my Savior. He doesn't say he believes in the power of man. Yeah. I mean, and there was an interesting episode in Cuba when, and you can find the transcript online, they've got this online, where Putin was interviewed by the Cuban press. This also, I think, was in 2000. I think it was December, and they asked him whether he was a communist. And Putin gave the strangest answer. He said, call me a pot, but heed me not. Or another translation would be, call me a pot, but don't put me in the oven. And that's like, what does he mean by that? You ask him if he's a communist, and he doesn't say yes or no. He just says that.
Right.
And that's a communist answer, though. That is an answer. If you understand how the Aesopian language that they always use, they speak in code to their own followers, and then they speak in a deceptive way to us, so that we're fooled into believing they're not. And you look all around the world, every communist leader is denying that they're a communist. Hugo Chavez denied he was a communist. The Workers' Party leaders, Dilma Rousseff and Lula da Silva, denied they were communists. Putin denies he's a communist. The Chinese leaders portray themselves as capitalists. I remember Jiang Zemin came here and said that his political hero was Abraham Lincoln when he came here. And he was on 60 Minutes, and I said, wow, Chinese communist whose hero is Abraham Lincoln. I mean, that's...
Jeff, I need to stop you here for just a moment.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, I inadvertently came in contact with a lot of communists as part of the peace movement, and I got to know some of these guys, and the communists admire Abraham Lincoln, and I've since found out that the failed communist revolution in Germany, a lot of those communists ended up in the Lincoln administration, Lincoln. Yeah, well, you know this, but most Americans don't. It was a shock and a surprise to me. But Lincoln is widely admired by communists worldwide, isn't he?
Yes. Oh, yeah, he is. Karl Marx admired him. But, of course, that doesn't mean Lincoln was a communist. It meant that it merely meant that they liked him. And the communists, they had certain ideas about the unification of the human race and the equality of people that, of course, made them sympathetic to the cause of freeing the black slaves in the United States. And so that there was a coincidence of objectives there. But the communist movement was very young then. It wasn't what it later became in many regards. But yes, communism has a history in the United States going back to the far into the 19th century.
It does. And people, if you don't understand the history, it's hard to understand everything else. You need to know the foundational elements of all these things. And I'm a big fan of Anatoly Golitsyn's book, also, New Lies for Old. I think it's very foundational for people to understand what's going on, don't you, sir?
Absolutely, it does.
It does. Here's our break.
Golitsyn, yeah.
We had a break. We can talk about Golitsyn when we get back. Stay tuned. Jeff Nyquist. His website's linked on my links page at thelibertyman.com. Jeff, you got a follow-up comment on Anatoly Golitsyn's book?
Yeah, maybe people haven't heard of him. He was a KGB major who defected in December 1961. He worked in counterintelligence in a think tank in Moscow, where they were planning the reorganization of the KGB in the 1950s to carry out what they called the long-range strategy of deception, which would include fake splits in the communist bloc, including a fake split between China and Russia, to cause America to run in and support China's industrialization. And the other operation was a future collapse of communism that would be used as the final offensive to disarm the West and prepare for the final victory of communism worldwide. That would be the summary. Golitsyn wrote a book about this in 1984 in which he predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he made like 140 falsifiable predictions, of which about 93% came true by 1992, and I believe the percentage is higher now.
Right. Right. And I was talking about Golitsyn's book last week. The title of it is New Lies for Old. He wrote a follow-up book, Perestroika Deception, which I believe is well done also, but I believe the first book is the more important. If you're only going to get one, get that one. And if you want to read the follow-up book, Perestroika Deception, by all means do it. And when he came to the West, MI5 in England and the CIA both debriefed him, didn't they, Jeff?
Yeah, he was debriefed because he had information about spy networks and penetration of NATO. In fact, a somewhat fictional movie made by Alfred Hitchcock was based on his defection. It was called Topaz.
Really? Topaz? I wasn't, I'm a Hitchcock fan. I'll have to check that out. Topaz.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm a movie buff, and I'll be checking out Netflix and Amazon as soon as the show's over.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Jeff, we got about 2 minutes left here. What information you want to get out to these people these last 2 minutes?
Well, I think about the coup against President Trump with the whole Russia thing. It's very important to understand how communist strategy and politics works, how they play on both sides. They use a dialectical thinking where they control both sides, trying to create an outcome. Everybody expected Hillary Clinton to win that election, and she did not win. And I believe that Hillary Clinton is part of this communist conspiracy to destroy the United States.
Agreed.
And the fact that she lost really upset their plans. And so they needed to destroy Donald Trump. And they created the perfect diversion. All of their people were Russian agents. They began posturing after the 2012 election. They began to posture as anti-Russian champions of America versus Russia. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They postured against Russia, but it was all fake.
It was.
And they used that. And then they continued to make that posturing because it masked who they really were.
Exactly.
They were really helping Russia with the technology.
Jeff, we're out of time. Let's talk privately soon. We're going to have you back on here.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. That's it for the day. Get your medical supplies, energy, clean your essential oils now while you can, your firearms, ammunition. Never, ever give up your guns. Have a fun, safe, productive day. And God bless America.